Brent Musburger himself. How are you, Brent?
I'm fine, Rich. How are you this morning, lad?
I am wondering what you thought of the news from yesterday, sir.
Well, we've been expecting that because whenever the Supreme Court decides to review a lower court's ruling, it's around 90% that they're going to overturn it. And so certainly they did in this particular case. However, my advice to New Jersey is to move quickly to implement it. And I get late word this morning that that's exactly what they're going to do, that Monmouth Racetrack says they will be open for betting on individual sports on Memorial Day, May 28th, coming up. And the reason for that, and you alluded to the fact that the court said that the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, which we call PASPA, was unconstitutional. However, in his majority opinion, and I am sure that the NFL attorneys, along with the NBA attorneys, noticed this one sentence from Justice Samuel Alito. He wrote that, quote, Congress can regulate sports gambling directly, okay? And so the NFL and the NBA are both out, and they came out yesterday and said that they hope that Congress can step in and make an overall law regulating sports gambling, which means that if New Jersey is open for business, as Nevada was in 1992, they can be grandfathered in, and they can manage their own sports wagering account. So it is just beginning, Rich, across the country. Already we've had a battle break out in Connecticut between the Indian-controlled casinos up there in the state. And the state has withdrawn legislation. The battle in California will be waged between the racetracks and the Indian-authorized casinos. So the battle royale is going to continue across the landscape. However, I'm fully expecting New Jersey to be open for business for the upcoming NFL season.
So what do you say, Brent, to those who are concerned about the integrity that the low-paid wide receiver, the potential college student, if it reaches that, will throw something for whatever amount of cash because gambling will be so much more prevalent or easier to undertake? What do you say to that, Brent?
I suppose the same thing I would say for an alcoholic walking past a bar, that obviously we have to be vigilant in every particular area. And I would point out that no one is more vigilant about the moving of money when it comes to betting on individual games than the bookmakers themselves. If you go behind the counter of any sports book here in Las Vegas, the computers run 24/7, and you can see exactly where the money is being wagered, not just here in the United States, but around the globe, and no one keeps a closer eye on it. I've always been concerned about, Rich, about the collegiate athlete because they are not paid at all. However, I've come to the conclusion that if it was not allowed in the United States, that people would continue to bet on the college games illegally offshore. We're better off having a regulated market. Certainly there are going to be problems. There have been problems worldwide with certain friendly soccer matches played in faraway places where the evil intents have taken over results. You always have. They've been aware of that for a long, long time. And so I don't think that changes in any particular regard. I would be very, very surprised if the third-string wide receiver was vulnerable simply because he's being paid. He knows what the rules are. It's stated when he signs that contract. He sees it inside the locker room in the National Football League. And I would be shocked if because the third-string wide receiver probably is not going to be in a position where he can impact the outcome of a game one way or another. Back in the days when there were rumors galore about professional football players, it always centered on one position, and that was the quarterback.
Hall of Famer Brent Musburger joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. So how does the money work then, Brent? I mean, we just had Don Van Natta on, and I asked him the question of how the sports leagues are going to try to wet their beak, unions, players, et cetera. And I mentioned how you, last time you were on this subject on this show, laughed off the notion from the commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, in an op-ed piece that a percentage will just be cut to sports leagues, that would not fly with towns like yours or anybody else who's in this business. How does it work where those sports leagues now want to get their piece if it's all legal and above board?
Well, obviously, they're going to have to negotiate with each of the individual states. That was the ruling yesterday, unless there's a federal law passed regarding that. What it basically shows is everybody's been worried about the integrity, but now that it looks like it's going to become legal, everybody wants a piece of the action. And I would say look to the Premier League and the other major soccer associations, look down to Australian rules football, and see what happens is an increase in television ratings probably would be encouraged. So you raise the rates, your product is worth more money. Mark Cuban said that the value of the top four teams in each of the leagues had basically doubled yesterday. And I'm not sure I agree with that assessment, but I'm sure that the value went up. And also, if you take a close look at the Premier League, at least half of those teams have agreements with different betting concerns like Ladbrokes. Some of them even wear uniforms that are attached to sports gambling. And obviously, if they made agreements with individual bookmakers, you are the bookmaker of the New York Giants or whatever in years past. That's a business agreement between two parties. But trying to get a tax, which has never existed here in the state of Nevada, there's no such thing as an integrity fee. The league is responsible for marketing its own product, and I'm sure they would like to get a piece of the action. I don't think there's any question about that. Some of the teams in the NFL obviously have financial agreements with the fantasy sites, which was very interesting because those fantasy sites came out until yesterday and said, hey, this is a game of skill. This is not gambling on the outcome of a game. And then both of them came out yesterday and quickly said, hey, we're ready to go into the sports betting business. So there you have it, my friend.
It's amazing. Brent Musburger, a few more minutes with Brent here on this subject. And you touched upon it. So let's say TV ratings do go up as people expect and television contracts get more expensive. And then wouldn't you think TV networks would want to try and get in this business themselves and start just flat out communicating to gamblers through the television sets, through the radio speakers, through internet connections? And in that regard, how do you see TV networks and sports networks covering this sort of stuff that you have already been on the ground floor of, Brent?
Yeah, I think that obviously it will expand. And the various networks will go, and they will have shows like ours here at VSIN dedicated to the betting. I would think that the pregame shows, Rich, would probably let's just take the NFL Network down the road. I would think that at least the crawl at the bottom of it would probably have the updated odds and the over/under numbers on the games, and that you yourself, with some of the analysts on the NFL, will become more acceptable around the league for you to talk about, hey, they've got the wrong favorite in this Atlanta-Philadelphia game. I think if you bog down in the minutia of the numbers, the 6.5, 10.5, things like that, I think that becomes pretty boring after a while. I mean, there's only a certain segment of the population that's really, really involved with all of those numbers. I think everybody is very interested in what the number is. Who's the favorite in this game and how big a favorite are they? I think that certainly to me has always been part of the information base. And I'm talking specifically about the National Football League. Although it was interesting, I noted when you talked about the people in the NBA and the Western Conference, how it's over. It's fascinating to me because the Houston Rockets are a slight favorite in the second game. And I suspect that's based upon the zigzag theory, which you have. And obviously, it'll be a do-or-die game for Houston. If they're going to stay alive at all, they've got to win game two. Now, there's a certain percentage of the population that's interested in that will make a bet. Most of the population will not. They'll watch the game, but they would be interested to know that the Houston Rockets are favored, even though they were blown out by Kevin Durant and the Warriors in game one. But there will be specific shows about series prices and where we stand after 4 weeks of a season and things like that. You can always make it interesting to the general public.
Do you think it will ever, Brent, get to the point where sports leagues will allow or award rights holders status to organizations like yours, where the play-by-play, somebody like yourself or an analyst, isn't just describing the action, but describing the action in relation to the line? Brent?
Yeah, there will be like multiple channels in which they certainly will do that, because they know based on experience right now that most of the gambling on sports in Europe is in-game. And so that as the game goes on, obviously you take a channel and let's say it's Jim Nance and Romo doing the play-by-play. That will always exist. That's not going to change for sure. And that will have the majority of the audience. But you could run another channel at the same time, somewhat similar to the Red Zone channel, in that you would update the scores, but you would also update the changing line based on the scores of the game, and you would put the halftime numbers up and the over-under numbers. There's no reason why that won't exist, and that would be another stream of revenue for the leagues, as they would sell the exclusive rights to something like that. The Red Zone has been so successful for them.
My guys here in the studio, because you say you have your guys here in the desert. My guys in the studio just went nuts over that. What do you want to call that?
We want to call it the Bet Zone channel.
The Bet Zone channel.
There you go.
Yeah.
You guys have got the great name, the Bet Zone channel.
There we go.
And believe me, you'd have a hell of an audience for it.
Well, and in the meantime, Brent, I guess just to wrap this up, you're saying that we on NFL Game Day Morning on NFL Network should look for a certain gentleman from, say, the country of Greece who might know the line and have our own Greek on our program very shortly. It'll come full circle, is what you're saying, Brent.
Yes, exactly. We need a young Greek, no question about it.
What would he think? Last one. What do you think he would think about this day, Brent? Jimmy?
I think you have a big smile on his face. You know, he was back in the beginning and was the first legitimate contact with betting on the NFL to make an appearance on a pregame show. I think he'd be very satisfied and hopeful that it'll be monitored like it should be legally and up front. The Greek was kind of interesting in that way. He came from the dark side, came over to the bright side, and he always wanted it to be run efficiently and honestly in the end, and so he'd be very happy with where we are today.
Brent, love the chats, as always. Thanks for joining, and everybody will be listening to you opine on this subject, no doubt, for forevermore. My guys in the desert on VSIN on Sirius XM every single day, 3 to 5 Pacific time out there in Las Vegas. Thanks for the call, Brent. Always enjoy it.
Thanks, Rich. Okay.
You got it. That's Brent Musburger.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.